Okay, so you want to own a nail salon. Here's the pitch, and it's one of the most tempting in all of small business. The barrier to entry is almost nothing. You don't need a franchise fee, you don't need a fancy degree, you don't need $1 million building. For as little as a few $1,000s, you can rent a chair, and for maybe $40,000 or $50,000, you can open a small salon of your own. It's mostly a cash business. People come in every 2 weeks like clockwork, and once you're set up, the fantasy goes, you just collect the money while the techs do the work. It sounds like the perfect passive income machine, and that is exactly why it's one of the most misunderstood businesses in America. Because here's the thing, almost nobody tells you. That same low barrier to entry that makes it so easy for you to open a salon makes it just as easy for everyone else. And when anybody can open one on any corner, you get exactly what you'd expect. A brutal, grinding price war that pushes the profit margin down to almost nothing. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the nail salon on your corner probably makes far less than you think. You'll understand how a Hollywood actress accidentally created this entire industry in 1975. You'll understand the strange labor system that means the person doing your nails often isn't even an employee. And you'll understand why a business that looks like easy money is actually one of the hardest, thinnest margin grinds in the entire service economy. Let's start with the origin, because it's one of the best stories in business, and almost nobody knows it. The modern American nail salon industry was, in a very real sense, invented by accident by an actress. Her name is Tippi Hedren. You might know her as the star of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, but in 1975, after the fall of Saigon, Hedren was volunteering as a relief coordinator at a refugee camp called Hope Village, near Sacramento, California. It was full of Vietnamese women who had just lost everything and needed a way to build new lives in America, and the women kept admiring Hedren's manicured nails, so Hedren had an idea. She flew in her own personal manicurist to teach a group of about 20 of these women how to do nails. She brought in a local beauty school to train them for free, and those 20 women became the seed of something nobody could have predicted. They learned the trade, they taught others, they opened their own shops, and they built an industry. Today, Vietnamese Americans make up around 80% of California's licensed manicurists and roughly half of the entire trade nationwide. An entire American industry dominated for 50 years by the descendants and community of 20 refugees and one Hitchcock actress who simply wanted to help. Hedren, by the way, never took a cent of ownership in any of it. But those Vietnamese-owned salons did something else that reshaped the whole business. They made nails cheap. Before the 80s, a manicure was a luxury. A full set of acrylic nails could cost $50, which back then was real money, and it was something mostly wealthy women did. The new wave of salons introduced low-cost acrylics and undercut everyone, often charging 30 to 50% less than the competition. And suddenly, a manicure went from an occasional luxury to something a normal person could afford every couple of weeks. That democratization was great for customers. It was the beginning of a very hard problem for owners, because once the entire industry competes on being cheap, you've started a race to the bottom that has never really stopped. And if you thought the low prices were the whole challenge, the cost side is where it really bites. Let's actually look at the money. Say you own a salon and a technician does 4 services in a day at $40 each. That's $160 of revenue from that chair. Sounds fine, but now subtract the cost. Labor in a nail salon typically eats up nearly half of all revenue right off the top. Then rent, which in a decent location can run several $1,000s a month. Then product, then utilities, then licensing, then insurance, then the constant replacement of supplies. By the time you add it all up, the margins are shockingly thin. Industry estimates put the average nail salon's profit margin somewhere in the mid-single digits to the low teens as a percentage of revenue. Some research pegs it as low as 4 or 5%. That means on a salon grossing $300,000 a year, the actual take-home profit might be $15,000, maybe less, and that's before the owner has accounted for the enormous number of hours they personally worked. To break even, one analysis found a typical salon needs to perform thousands of services a year just to cover its fixed costs before earning a single dollar. This is not a passive cash cow. It's a volume grind with a knife-thin margin in a market where a new competitor can open across the street next month and undercut you. And if you want proof of how fragile that math is, look at what happened in 2020. When the pandemic hit, nail salons were among the hardest hit businesses in the entire economy because the service is impossible to do from 6 feet away. You cannot paint someone's nails remotely. Salons were forced shut for months, and industry revenue collapsed by roughly a quarter, almost overnight. Estimates at the time suggested that somewhere between a third and half of all shuttered nail salons might never reopen. A business with a 4 or 5% margin has almost no cushion, so when the doors close for even a few months, there's nothing to fall back on. It got worse. Early in the pandemic, the governor of California stood up at a press conference and announced that the state's first case of community spread had been traced to a nail salon. He never released any evidence to back it up, and the industry was furious, feeling singled out and blamed. As one industry advocate put it, once you've said that, how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube? It was a vivid lesson in just how exposed and how little protected this industry really is. Which brings us to the strangest part of the whole business, the labor system. When you sit down and someone does your nails, you probably assume that person is an employee of the salon, earning a wage. Often, they're not. A huge portion of the industry runs on something called booth rental or chair rental. Under this model, the technician isn't an employee at all. They're an independent contractor who rents their station from the salon owner and keeps their own service revenue. Think about what that means. In a booth rental salon, the owner isn't really running a nail business in the way you'd imagine. They're running something closer to a landlord operation, renting out chairs, and the technician takes on all the risk. No guaranteed wage, no benefits, no paid time off, just whatever they earn minus the rent. Now, there are two ways to see this, and both are true. To some, booth rental is genuine entrepreneurship. The technician is their own boss, sets their own hours, keeps what they earn, and can build their own clientele. To others, it's a way to sidestep the obligations of being an employer. No minimum wage guarantee, no overtime, no payroll taxes, all pushed onto the worker. And that tension exploded into a national fight in 2015. That year, the New York Times published a major, 2-part investigation into New York nail salons. It painted a devastating picture. Workers earning far below minimum wage, new hires forced to pay a fee just to start and then work unpaid, and manicurists exposed to dangerous chemicals. The reaction was immediate and enormous. The governor of New York ordered emergency measures within days. A crackdown followed. New rules, new inspections, a Bill of Rights for nail workers. But here's where it gets complicated, because the story didn't hold up cleanly. A serious backlash followed from other journalists who went back and checked the reporting. A lengthy critique in the New York Review of Books argued the investigation had gotten key facts wrong, that the wage claims didn't match the actual job ads, which showed pay far higher than the Times had described. A libertarian magazine published its own multi-part rebuttal disputing the health claims. And eventually, the Times' own public editor concluded the series had, in places, gone too far in generalizing about an entire industry. So who was right? The honest answer is partly both. Follow-up enforcement did find real wage violations, and the state recovered around $2 million for hundreds of workers. But that number also suggested the problem, while real, might not have been as universal as the original story implied. What's not in dispute is that this is a low-wage, cash-heavy, immigrant-run industry operating in a genuine gray zone, and that the truth is messier than either a clean expose or a clean defense. There's one more cost to this business that isn't measured in dollars, and it's worth being honest about. The chemicals. Nail work involves regular exposure to substances that have raised real health concerns over the years, the so-called toxic trio among them. The industry and regulators, especially in California, have pushed reforms, better ventilation, safer product formulations, healthy salon certification programs. Experts still disagree about exactly how dangerous the day-to-day exposure really is, but it's a real part of the equation for the people doing the work, and any honest look at the business has to include it. Now, you might be thinking, if the mom-and-pop model is such a grind, why hasn't some big company come in, professionalized it, and taken over the way corporations did to so many other industries? People have tried. There's a company that set out to be the clean, ethical corporate nail chain. Everyone a real W-2 employee with benefits and a retirement plan, safer products, higher prices. It's a genuinely admirable model, and it is very hard to make it work. Even after years and a record year of sales, that company was still losing millions of dollars annually. That's the punchline of the whole industry. The thing that makes it accessible to immigrant families with almost no capital, low costs, and rock-bottom prices is the exact same thing that makes it nearly impossible for a big, high-cost corporation to come in and dominate. The race to the bottom protects the little guy by making the business unattractive to anyone who wants to do it at scale the right way for more money. So let's step back and answer the question we started with. Should you own one? If you go in thinking it's passive income, you will be brutally disappointed. This is a hands-on, high-competition, thin-margin business where the owner very often works as hard as anyone in the building. The economics only tend to work when the owner is also a skilled technician who works the chairs, keeps labor costs down, builds a loyal base of regulars, and grinds it out over years. But here's the other side, and it's why the industry has endured for half a century. For hundreds of thousands of people, especially immigrant families, the nail salon has been one of the most accessible ladders into business ownership that America offers. You can start with almost nothing, learn a skill in a few hundred hours, work in someone else's shop, save, and eventually buy your own. It has built real wealth for families who arrived with nothing, one manicure at a time. That's not a passive income fantasy. It's something harder and, frankly, more impressive. And it all traces back to that refugee camp in 1975. 20 women who had lost everything, an actress who wanted to help, and a skill that turned out to be a foundation you could build a life on. The nail salon looks like easy money from the outside. It never was. What it actually is one of the purest small businesses left. Thin margins, hard work, fierce competition, and a genuine shot for anyone willing to do the work. If this changed the way you'll look at the nail salon on your corner, subscribe. We take apart the economics of one everyday business every week, and the numbers are never what you'd guess.